This episode is sponsored in part by PTZ Optics. Why hire a camera operator when the control is in your hands? Visit ptzoptics.com for more information. And by NewTek, makers of the TriCaster TC1. Stun your viewers, not your accountant. Visit newtek.com for more information.
Hey guys, welcome to another edition of Creators Corner. Welcome, and I hope you guys are here and gonna be ready for some fun, because we're gonna have a lot of fun tonight. Because my guest today, he's got a story, and a good story at that. But before we get into that, I just want to let everybody know that once we get started, put your comments in, put your questions in, but we're not going to get to the questions until the very end of the show. We want to give our guest the opportunity to speak and tell us all about everything that's going on in his world. And I think you guys are going to be really surprised because, I mean, entrepreneurial spirit at a heart. This gentleman not only is a co-owner of the Pittsburgh Gaming Expo in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, but he's an avid video game collector, dungeon master, and also he loves tabletop RPGs. Everybody, welcome with me. We've got Mr. Brian Wissner, the Wizz. What's going on, man?
Steve, thank you so much for having me on, man. It's great to be back.
Oh, it's great to have you back and sit down and have a chat with you, because you've got, I know we're going to get to it later, but you got an amazing story of some stuff that's been going on in your life the last couple months.
Yeah, what month is it again?
Right? That's So let's just dive into this. Why don't you talk a little bit real quick before we get into your past and how you got into all that stuff. Just give everybody just a brief. They never seen you before. Who are you?
Yeah, so I'm Brian Wissner. I'm one of the co-owners and co-show runners of the Pittsburgh Gaming Expo. We're in our 4th year now. I also run and co-founded the Pittsburgh Retro Gaming community on Facebook, and also Pittsburgh Modern Gaming. So we're not just, old school, we're new school too. We're pretty much, we run the gamut of everything. And that's what I do. That's who I am.
Nice. And I have this pulled up here, guys. You can always join it. Just look for, I'm a big Castlevania fan, so I love the Castlevania font.
See it on the wall back there, right?
Oh, I saw it, and the nice little hint to Castlevania. Last year was the first time I've been to the Pittsburgh Gaming Expo, and we got to meet Brian, and Brian's been not just a person that's created a convention, but you've been a friend. I mean, we've been chatting back and forth, text messaging, phone calls. Last week, unfortunately, I fell ill, and Brian can tell you because he was on the phone with me. He's like, "Dude, you're like, it's just not going to do this justice." So we postponed it a week, and here we are. But Brian, you got a nice slew of NES games behind there, and as you know, I'm trying to collect for the North American collection. How many do you have back there?
Oh man, you just caught me. Like
I caught you.
I don't know, to be honest with you. I'm a bad collector in that regard. I don't know. Probably close, maybe 100. I'm not even sure. I kind of pick up whatever, I see that interests me as I go through. I've never made the run for a complete set or anything like that. My 2 main focuses were Super Nintendo and NES, and got a little sidetracked. So that's part of the reason why my information is not up to date. When the pandemic hit and the game prices went insane, and I was at home more, I really veered back more into actually collecting for tabletop RPGs. So you can't see it here, but upstairs I have shelves much larger than this from floor to ceiling that are full of like tabletop RPG core rule books and stuff. There's some on the other side of where I'm sitting right now. So that's, you can only pursue so many passions at one time, right?
I saw, I saw a picture with you were having game night the one night, and you've got like these monitors around you, you got books around you. I mean, you're doing that whole what do they call it? A dungeon master? Is that what the tabletop community calls?
Yeah. So it depends on what game you're playing, right?
Okay.
So if you're playing Dungeons and Dragons, the term that's typically thrown around is Dungeon Master. If you're playing Dungeon Crawl Classics, which I also run for, you're going to be called a judge. If you are playing, it runs the gamut. There's so many different titles for these different games that you play. Some call you the narrator, some call you the keeper. It all depends on what you're playing, but at the end of the day, you're the narrator. You're the arbiter of what is happening at the table. You are the AI that is in the tabletop RPG, so to speak, that normally you interface with in a video game. Well, before all that existed, you just had somebody sitting at a table saying, I rolled a 20-sided die and it came up this, and based on that, this is what it says should happen. This is what the rules would dictate. So, yeah.
And we were kind of joking before the show tonight, and I said, I want to make sure I get my terminology right because, I know we get a little ornery in the retro gaming community, but I know the tabletop community, they can get kind of ornery as well, I guess, when it comes to terminology. So
I've been corrected a couple times when I refer to them as tabletop RPGs.
Yeah.
Because they are not incorrect when they say, well, we were first and they were just called RPGs. And, I'm like, well, you're right, but we are in much more diverse times now. Now we have JRPGs, CRPGs, TTRPGs, so you got to differentiate.
I always say that, like in the last video I did on YouTube, I was like, I know I'm probably going to get a lot of people unsubscribing from me, but I was like, I really don't like RPGs. And I was like, before you hit that unsubscribe button, hear me out. I'm like, I just don't, now that I'm older, I just don't have the time for the RPGs because you got to put a lot of time into them. It's not that I don't like to play them.
I agree. I mean, you see what I have sitting as keystones on the shelf here.
There's a lot of time and effort.
It takes a huge time sink. It's one of the things that actually I love that I'm seeing in the retro scene with video games, because there's a retro scene in tabletop RPGs too, but they're recognizing that fact. And like if you go out and you buy the Pixel collection for Final Fantasy, they've updated them all so that it actually makes them more forgiving as far as like the time demand that it asks of you. You can adjust the rate at which you bring in money or experience points, and it takes a lot of the grind out of it because they take a ton of time. And that's why I don't finish games unless they're on like a Nintendo DS or
finish games. What's
a
that?
Nintendo Switch, because I'm running with my kids. I don't have time to sit down in front of my television.
I understand that now. Having a 15-year-old and then having a newborn, and then my son's in the middle, but she's into track. She's also in band, so it's like nonstop Monday through Friday, and then the weekends we have to take her here and there to her friends. I'm sure you know all about that too.
Yeah, I feel like you're reading from my script.
Yeah, it's like, so portables have become my friend, but I digress. Let's go and let's jump to how this all got started. Your love, your passion for tabletop. I mean, you could mix it in if you want. Video games. Where did it all start? Were you like most of these guys out here that I've been interviewing? It started as a child and then you kind of got away from it, or what? What's the sauce here?
Yeah, actually, to a degree, that is a bit of my story. So I'm a big fan of show and tell, so you're going to have to bear with me. And I know collectors like show and tell. So for me, with the video game part of it, it started with the Commodore 64. Like that was my first ever video game console. I got it for Christmas when it was new back in the 80s. It was cool. I had I think it was called Rootin' Tootin' on it, Diamond Mine, Castle Hassle. Those were my games. They were great, but I didn't really have the bug. Like I would play them. They were fun, but I was still pretty young. And then the late 80s came around and this came, and that really kind of like sunk its teeth into me a bit. I started playing, Castlevania, and actually one of the games that's responsible for PRG even existing. Crystalis, which I have back here,
That's
was
a good
like
game.
I didn't have Zelda. Zelda was my first Zelda was Crystalis. So, games like that. And my father, the other end of it, my father was an avid reader. So I would go to bookstores with him as a kid, and there would be these really weird but really cool books with these awesome illustrations. I wasn't big into reading, but I loved looking at the pictures. And we would go to hobby shops for different things. And then eventually there was this guy sitting on a shelf at one of the hobby shops. And I'm like, oh, what is that? It just looks so awesome. Like, I want that game. I didn't even know, I didn't understand the concept of it or anything. And it would, he let me get it. I brought it home. Me and two of my friends cracked into it. And we saw there were like 6 characters. And we're like, okay, so I guess I'll play 2 of them. You play 2 of them and you play 2 of them. But wait, there's supposed to be somebody who runs this whole thing. I won't cheat. We'll just let the dice decide.
Yeah.
And that was my introduction to Dungeons and Dragons in like the early, like, mid 80s, late. Actually, I think that came out in 92. I think if I'm correct.
Dungeons and Dragons.
So that game in particular. So I'd been getting exposed to the books for years as a kid, but never played the game, never had any concept of it. And then that came out in 91, 92, and I saw it at a store, and I'm probably about like 12 years old at that point, 13. And that sunk its teeth into me. And, we played around with it, and pretty much up until college, I was doing both of these things, playing video games. The Super Nintendo was absolutely huge for me. Like Super Nintendo, that was the console that convinced me, like, oh, I love this thing. I love video games. Final Fight Guy, Legend of Zelda, Contra, and Castlevania were games that we rented. We rented a Super Nintendo. We rented the games. I'm like, I need to buy one of these. I went out and got a summer job as a caddy at a golf course just to save up enough money to buy a Super Nintendo and a couple of games, and then I quit my job.
But the funny part, so I'm trying to understand this, because the funny part here is Super Nintendo was your big console. But
Yeah.
what do you have behind you?
Here's, well, you can't see it down below. So Super Nintendo starts.
Yeah, I can see
I
see you have a lot. Yeah. If people can't see that, I'll go back full screen here. He's got some that are complete in box. It's not just like the NES is all loose for the most part, from what I can see, right?
I mean, yeah, I've got. I mean, here's some gems.
Oh, there's a Fire and Ice.
Some eye candy. There's Fire and Ice up there.
He's bringing that for me this year at Pittsburgh.
Yeah, right. I talked about this in a thread on the PRG recently.
Oh wow, there you go.
So
these like you accumulated growing like through your life. This isn't something that you bought since you've been an adult.
It's a mixture. Mixture.
Okay.
So some of these are the result of community.
Okay.
Others are the result of finding a time capsule in my parents' house when I moved back to Pittsburgh from Baltimore. I lived in Baltimore for a number of years.
Okay.
Came back, cracked into some stuff, and found this box of like a mixture of like Nintendo and Super Nintendo games, some complete, some not complete. A lot of the Super Nintendo ones were, because I was older, took better care of them. And why the main focus seems like it's Super Nintendo is second edition D&D is my jam. Absolutely. That's where I spent most of my time until I got back into it. But yeah, so my oldest now, she was younger at the time. She was 4 years old, and I was kind of getting back into playing video games, becoming a dad, career change, things like that. Video games and tabletop RPGs, all of that gaming kind of took a back seat. And I'd hooked up a modded Xbox because I wanted to play some games, and I didn't want to play the violent stuff that was current in front of my kid. So I fired up this modded Xbox with like Super Nintendo games on it that I dug out of storage, and she was transfixed at 4 years old. And I was like, oh wait, there's something here. So, I let her play. Obviously, the Duke was too big for a 4-year-old's hands.
Yeah.
I hope everybody knows what the Duke is. So I was like, well, I need to pull out an old NES because that seems like that would work.
Yeah.
And I pulled it out and we, fired up old NES games, and it was just the right size for her hands. It worked. She had a great time with it. And I was like, hey, kid, do you want to start collecting video games with dad? Something a cool hobby for us to have. And yeah, of course, what 4-year-old's going to say no?
Right.
So
exactly.
we start collecting video games, and that's how that kind of springboarded us by chance into like how the whole PRG, Pittsburgh Retro Gaming scene as a community started, because the guy who very dear friend of mine now, who we started this with, Colt Damaso, I met him on a Craigslist post to buy video games on like a shady, looked like a shady Craigslist deal on a gas station parking lot in February, to swap games.
And
because Craigslist was still the place.
And for people that don't know, Cole is like the complete polar opposite of Brian here, because Cole is just like, what'd you say, like a heavy metal rocker dude.
Oh, he's a straight up metalhead, but he's a sweetheart.
Nicest guy in the world. Like we last year, it was just funny because it's like two different dynamics, but you guys worked awesome as a team. I thought that was pretty cool. I just wanted to kind of throw that in there from before.
But so that's why the big focus is on NES.
Well, that's cool though.
That's kind of where we got started, and then I started branching out into some other consoles. Like there's a shelf over here you can't see that's like a bunch of complete and box Sega Genesis games, because I realized like, wait, I could collect complete and box Sega Genesis way easier than I can collect this stuff.
Right.
So like anybody on a budget. So I started collecting Sega Genesis, and then the Switch came out, and I was like, I have one more of these in me. I have one more launch day console in me at the age I was at the time, which I won't say because I'm older now. But not that old. But yeah, so when the Switch launched, Colt and I both went and camped out at a GameStop, had pre-orders. We were there to get it at open, and that was the console then that I started collecting for real heavy. So that's also why I've lost track of how many of these I have, because I don't necessarily focus on collecting for one console, as much as I would like to. Just, attention issues, I jump from one thing to the other. So, but yeah, I mean, there's just so much to love in video games too. Like, how can you choose one console? Like, I've got some TurboGrafx 16 games on this shelf here.
Nice. That's been my favorite since I acquired it. So, a soft spot there.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you have to. I mean, I admire people that are doing it, but you didn't grow up though playing a lot of this. The TurboGrafx, right? You didn't get that like me, where we got it when we were older.
I knew about it.
Right.
There was one kid I knew at school who had a TurboGrafx, and I'll never forget his birthday party because he got a Super Nintendo, and it was like he was so thrilled that he got a Super Nintendo, and it was exciting. But we all were more interested in the TurboGrafx 16 that he had for a while.
Right.
And we just wanted to play that. So it was that was the only experience I had with it. But I thought it was really cool. And then as I got older, started watching content creators on YouTube, started watching Classic Game Room with Mark Bussler, and he would go on about, Truxin and, games like that. Like, that is the thing that is so great about this community, is even if you didn't grow up with it, you're getting exposed to people who did,
right,
and getting to share that. So yeah, I struggle to focus on one because it's like, oh wait, this is really cool too. And so I try to get the best of like what will appeal to me from like multiple different console eras or generations.
What I think is kind of interesting with what you said was that Commodore was like your Commodore 64 was kind of like your first introduction to it. It's funny because a lot of the people that I've spoken with already, they started at the Atari 2600 era. Did you have any nostalgic love for the Atari? I mean, or were you kind of like me, where you're just like, it was cool for the time, but like,
I'm a big, and again, you can't see it, I have an arcade over there. which I know you've seen some
Yeah.
clips up, but not in this video, obviously. But yeah, I love stuff that gives me the feel of an arcade that's old school, and the Atari 2600 never really did that for me. 7800 did.
Well, yeah,
And
that was a
the
huge jump though from the
it
2600 to
was, but
7800. Yeah.
so there's some game like I have games on the 7800 that I didn't grow up with, but I grew up with the arcade version of it, and like Robotron on the 7800 is amazing.
Yeah.
And so I have that game and I have that console just so I can play that, but I did not play the 2600. I knew a kid who had it, and probably part of the reason why I never had any nostalgia for it. One, I had the Commodore, and two, I only ever experienced the 2600 on a black and white TV, and blast for the past black and white TVs. But like that just didn't. At the time, it didn't process for me that was because of the television, not because of the console. Yeah, and that in Pac-Man on the 2600 is kind of abysmal.
Yeah, that's what somebody was saying here. TeamFatGuy.com. There was no Atari 2600 game better than Space Shuttle. So I mean, it's up to the individual, right? You're gonna have
nostalgia goggles
right.
are powerful.
Like my buddy Glenn. Glenn loves the Atari. He's going to. I just thought it was interesting because a lot of these guys were like, "Oh, the Atari," and you're like me. You're just like, "Yeah, the Atari was cool. I played a few games, but there's just no nostalgic value right there." Like,
right.
if you find it at a garage sale, great. Because the games some of them are worth something in that, but you're not going out of your way to collect.
Yeah, I pick up things here and there, and I definitely lean more towards that 7800. I don't think I even own a 2600. It might be in the archive for the convention, but it's not here. Whereas I keep the 7800 here.
So, all right. So let's go. We have this. You grew up doing this. Super Nintendo's your jam. Okay, you get married. Does your wife sit there and say to you, now, I'm playing dumb a little bit because I met your wife and I know
Yeah.
When you first got married, was she just like, why are you collecting all this plastic? What are you thinking? Or was she supportive of it?
I am uniquely blessed in that she's
watching right now.
Yeah, right. Well, no, she's not, but she will be eventually, I'm sure. No, she is the ultimate enabler. There are probably times when I would have talked myself out of pickups, and she's like, "No, you work hard, you want it, you enjoy it.
Yep.
Go ahead and get it." That's why I have a centipede over there. Actually, the centipede was hers, but yeah, but she doesn't play it. But the centipede, the Miss Pac-Man Galaga cab, these things are as big as household appliances, and they only really do one thing, and it's not keep food cold.
No.
So but she supports it all, like the tabletop gaming. Like, she's an avid player at all of my games, whether I'm running Dungeons and Dragons or Dungeon Crawl Classics or the One Ring or Alien. Like, she is avid and enthusiastic about it. She's always on me about like, what's a great game that we could play together, on everyone in my family owns a Switch, because we all play games. And so we were big into Diablo 3 together on the Switch. She's fantastic. Hey, Steve, I'll pass that along. She'll appreciate that.
I think it has to be. We've talked about this on the show with other people. Like, I think you have to have a supportive wife when you're in this type of hobby, whether it's tabletop, whether it's gaming, because there's far more worse things you could be doing right now.
Well, that's pretty much what she says. Yeah,
it's the truth, though.
Yeah, there's way worse things to do with your time. And at the end of the day, you have a piece of media, a piece of art,
right,
that is not single faceted. You have music, you have visual, you have game design, you have puzzles, And it's a art form that you get to engage with.
Yes.
It's interactive, and that's a great way to spend your time, especially if you can get your whole family into it, especially in this day and age.
Yep.
How difficult it is to do things for a family.
Yeah, my kids look forward to game nights. I know you do game nights. In fact,
Yep.
creeping on Brian's Facebook, I saw a nice tabletop RPG setup that he had going on. And I swear, you guys think all the time that it looks like I'm trying to land the Death Star. This guy over here, like, I wouldn't even know what to do with some of this stuff. But there again, I'm not into tabletop. But you've got a setup, man. Like, it's going on. Like, we're not messing around here. I'm going to see if I can locate that picture. But,
yeah,
I mean, unbelievable. Like, there's you do a lot of work when you're playing these tabletops, right?
I do. And a lot of what you see at the table is me trying to minimize that workload because my schedule is such that it's very difficult to juggle all these flaming chainsaws, as I like to say. And I'm not going to allow one of those chainsaws to take out game night. So I have a bunch of miniatures that are on the shelf over here. And for a long time, that's how we played. We played with miniatures. And I rapidly came to the conclusion that it was really too time consuming for me to find the right miniatures, also financially burdensome to buy the right miniatures. So I gradually made the pivot towards I'm going to play with a virtual or digital tabletop. And sometimes we'll still incorporate minis there, but essentially what it allows me to do is it allows me to set up my entire game scenario, whatever the encounter is going to be. If it needs visual aids, it's set up virtually wherever I'm at in the world. And then I come and sit down at my table, log into my computer, fire up the monitor that I have laying back on its back at the
yeah, there's like a monster setup. I didn't find the other one, but I'll keep looking.
Yeah, keep looking. That's an interesting photo because that's actually one of the rare times I could tell by that perspective that I wasn't running, I was playing. But yeah, so, and I pipe in like music and ambient effects and things like that. And I have like 3 monitors going at any given time. One that's in the middle of the table, one that I'm using to interface with the, software with, and another one that I can see that I can throw up like special images or pieces of puzzles or clues, and then I can pivot that around to the players so they can see it as well. And it's a bit of a trade-off, right? It's not the same as, running, with miniatures. There's something I love about miniatures, that they're tactile. Like that game there, that's before I made the jump. You could see what one of the individuals who's a content creator who I would love to get to the show eventually. It goes by the name Professor Dungeon Master. He designed this concept of the ultimate dungeon terrain, and it's basically like Shakespeare. It's tabletop RPGs in the round, and you put the miniatures in the middle of the table, and you rotate, and everybody can see it and move it around. But again, it comes down to like the time prep, with miniatures and things like that.
I had to end it on that one. I had to show that one.
You have to throw yourself into this stuff because if you don't, it becomes such a dry experience. Everyone at the table should be laughing their asses off, having a good time, and feling heroic. And
I think we're going to use this as a thumbnail. We're going to do this as the thumbnail. No, I'm joking. But honestly, though, it's just amazing. Like I didn't know there was well when you and I walked around the show, and you were kind of giving me a tour and giving me the proper lingo, right? I didn't realize there was so much involved in these tabletop gaming, and I understood a little bit more with your draw with that. Which leads me to the next part of this. You get to the point, you're doing some game nights, your kids are involved, your wife's supportive. What's the next best logical thing? Brian says, well, let's make a gaming expo. Like, I just can't get enough gaming that I want to create an expo. Why don't you talk a little bit about that? What got that all started?
So, Colt and I met in 2014 through Craigslist. We were talking about it's a shame that there's nothing in Pittsburgh that represents, or in the region that represents, the collector scene here on Facebook. And we talked about that for a little bit, making small talk over the deal. And then I went home, and I like to consider myself a fairly good judge of personality and character and quality. And he seemed really cool and really nice. And I was like, hey, what's the worst that happens? Maybe it just doesn't work out. Let's start a Facebook group for retro game collecting. And we called it Pittsburgh Retro Gaming. And the old school logo for it was like a mishmash of like Tetris and Pac-Man and Atari consoles, Nintendo consoles, 20-sided dice, pencils, paper, and it all came together to make the skyline of Pittsburgh. And so that was kind of our banner, was, hey, if you like old school gaming, come and join this community. And it started off slow, and we're not the biggest group in the world now either at 20 or 10 years later, but we have about 6,000 members, and they're really active. So on the road to 6,000 members, the community starts talking and says, hey, we should do events. And we said, yeah, that's a good idea. We should do events. So we started doing small events, small little, we called them meetups, and we would do them in local game shops. And that just kind of kept building momentum. And we did an event at a local game store here called Game Masters. And it was so successful that Phil, the owner, dear friend of mine, he kicked us out and said, hey, this was cool and all, but you can't ever do this again because the township will shut me down. There's too many people. So then from there, we went to another place, an arcade called Victory Point here in Pittsburgh, and we did an event called Game the Halls because it was right between Christmas and New Year's. So we called it Game the Halls. And it was cool. It was the first time we did anything with arcade stuff. And moved forward a little bit, and we decided, let's do our own thing. Let's not do a thing in somebody else's space. Let's rent a hall. So in 2016, we rented a hall, and we did Pittsburgh Retro Gaming Expo. And it was cool. It was fun. It was one day, I think, which is a bit of a crunch, but it was fun, and we met some folks, and we collaborated over the next couple of years working on some, different concepts on things. And in 2019, Colt and I decided to go back to the drawing board. We met one of our partners on this endeavor, Alex Kinnaman, the owner of Retrograde Collectibles. And we decided, what, we kind of feel like we painted ourselves into a corner because the term retro had become so synonymous with this. Mm-hmm. Whereas there was absolutely a retro scene in tabletop gaming, but it's called the OSR. So and the R does not stand for retro. It stands for revival or renaissance. And so we decided, let's drop the R and just call it Pittsburgh Gaming Expo, PGX. And we were looking at fire halls, and we were going to do another fire hall show. And we were getting ready to book the Garden City Fire Hall when we did a podcast, and the GM of the Monroeville Convention Center, one of his staff had heard our podcast and knew that he was looking for a gaming style show at the Monroeville Convention Center. Now, mind you, when we were doing this, like Monroeville Convention Center, David L. Lawrence, the Sheridan at Station Square, and the Wyndham were all bucket list.
Right.
These were things that were not within our realm of, attainment anytime soon. And so he's like, come out and talk to me. I like what you guys are doing. I believe in what you're working towards. Let's talk. Okay, whatever. This has got to be a joke. But it wasn't. It was legit. And we went out with, the first thing I told him, I was like, look, I really, really appreciate your time, but I got to be honest with you. We can't afford this. Like, we are not, like, we don't have deep pockets. We have a couple $1,000, maybe not even a couple thousand. We maybe had like $1,200, and that's what we have. And he turned to us and goes, look, you guys have a great vision, and I'm going to give you some advice. I've been involved in this business for a while. If you listen to my advice, I will make this work, and you will make some money, and you will get to grow this thing. and we'll see where it goes from there. And if it doesn't work out after the first year, then okay, but I'm not going to like rake you over the coals.
Sure.
So we did it. Well, we were going to do it in 2020, and then COVID happened. So COVID shut everything down. And this is the bit where why we do this and why we decided to do this is because of community. Because community stuck by us through that. We had sold some badges, we'd sold some vendor space, and nobody asked for a penny back.
Wow.
At all, at any point throughout that. And we even said, like, hey, if you need to, we'll see what we can work out.
Mike.
My record, I have no doubt. I know you, bud. But they stuck by us, and we stuck by the convention center. And through that whole uncertainty, they worked with us really, really great. And eventually we were able to have our event in 2021. And it was a pretty big success considering we had almost no advertising budget. We had very few guests. It was a real learning process and a real challenge, but it was so rewarding. And then we kind of looked at each other, we're like, well, I guess we have to do this thing again. And we decided to make tabletop more a part of it because of that. And it's just kind of become this thing now where it's all the things that Colt and I are super passionate about. It's not just about video games. It's not just about tabletop RPGs. There's a big element of the show that is live music. There's a big part of the show that's cosplay and tattoo artists and vendors and panels. I mean, it is really becoming a celebration of all these things that branch off from the geek and gaming culture as a whole that has an abundant amount of overlap, whether people realize it or not. If you've played Final Fantasy, you're not that far away from playing Dungeons & Dragons Classics or D&D, or vice versa. And I get it. Not everybody's it's not going to tickle the itch for everybody, but there's a lot to talk about and share in that space. And I know that I've had people come to my show who have never played a tabletop RPG, who are only from the video game sphere, and now tabletop RPGs are one of their favorite hobbies. Everybody who plays at my table never played tabletop RPGs until they met me through Pittsburgh Retro Gaming Community, and then volunteered for the events. And then we became friends, and I was like, hey, let me show you this whole new thing to you called Dungeons and Dragons. And we actually didn't start with Dungeons and Dragons. We started with a different game called the Genesis, and it took off like wildfire for them. And now we play regularly every week. Every week up until recently, we were playing a tabletop RPG game on a Friday night. Scheduling just got in the way of that a little bit, but a lot of people, they don't realize just how much into it they're going to be. And the same way with like video games. I know people that don't play video games, which seems even more bizarre in this day and age. Like, who doesn't play video games? But there are people out there who just play like tabletop RPGs and board games, but there's stuff in this space that they can get exposed to that, gives them a new hobby or new passion, or maybe exposes them to a new type of music, things like that.
That's what I was telling you about earlier. It's not that I wouldn't. Well, my wife would probably have my head if I started getting into desktop RPGs, because one of the big things is you have to have the storage, and then you're going to want to collect the characters, and you're going to want to, like, in some cases, a lot of these guys paint their own characters, and so that's extra time, right, of customizing your characters.
Yeah, that was a rabbit hole we started to go down during the pandemic.
Takes time.
Pandemic,
it was different. You couldn't do anything else, so I'm sure a lot of guys. But I think for me, Like I was dating a girl back in high school. There was a game called Munchkin. Do you know? Have you heard of
Oh,
that?
Munchkin's great. Munchkin's
Okay,
hysterical.
so I used to have that. I guess that's considered an
It's a board game.
Is that considered a board game?
Well, it's a tabletop game.
Okay, so
Um,
it's not like you're let's go to Walmart and buy a board game for the family to sit down and play. It's more involved than that, I think.
It is. It helps if you have a background in tabletop RPGs, but I believe there's some. It's all very tongue in cheek. Munchkin is all about poking fun at the hobby itself, and it's ruthless.
Oh yes,
Um,
it is.
It's super ruthless, but it is all very tropey. And if you don't know the tropes, um, it's I wouldn't say it's less fun, but when I play with my family, my kids all get the jokes. And it's
Right.
great because some of these jokes are poking fun at like second and first and third edition Dungeons and Dragons, which my kids haven't really played those,
Right.
but they've been exposed to them. And they know because of the OSR,
Right.
which is
right.
stuff like Dungeon Crawl Classics, where it's like it's a modern game. They're printing new stuff for it, but it harkens back to those days of old school gaming. So just like you see with this stuff, where here's one great example actually. What is this? Haunted Halloween 86. Actually, local developer. And
Make sure you
that's
bring that one too. I need that one too.
while we're at it, I'll make sure you get 85 as well.
Oh,
But-
while you're pulling them out, yeah, let's go. Let's
Right.
go right down the line.
So, but the same thing's happening in the video game sphere with the retro scene. It's happening in the tabletop sphere with games like Dungeon Crawl Classics. So that's what Munchkin harkens back to, and
it was weird because my girlfriend was going to be away that Saturday, and she was like, "My dad's one, like you said, schedule's conflicted. He needed a fifth," and I'm like, "Because you have to have a certain amount of players sometimes to play these games, otherwise you can't play them." And she's like, "He
That
wants
is
you
the
to."
challenge.
Yeah, and she's like, "He wants you." I'm like, "I've never played this," and he's like, "Oh, I'll help you." So what started out as me just sitting down and appeasing her and giving him an extra body in the seat turned into I got done. I was like, "Wow, this is really cool." And so him and I, the following Saturday, we went out and I bought the Munchkin game, and then for my birthday, I think he got me an add-on to it or something like that. But it was really interesting because like I'd never even thought about that, but he was also into the tabletop stuff. So it's not the first time that I've seen people into it. And the one gentleman in the chat room, he's like, "Hey, get a resin printer, infinite tabletop miniatures." Do you do any of that with your miniatures?
I didn't, but like two of the there's a couple that plays at my I'm looking over like they're sitting at my table
Yeah.
to where I sit when I run games. What a great backdrop. I never thought about it either. Like while I'm running old school games, they're looking at all of this.
Oh yeah.
But yeah, so they actually went out and bought 3D printers, and they were printing miniatures left and right. And it really just came down to the time sink of like painting them. So that's why we kind of got away from it. It does. And like my hands, my wife is super talented with that. You've seen some of the stuff she does.
Yep.
She's really into it. So much so I bought her like a giant, like it was probably about that big. I have it on the shelf over here, a giant Demogorgon, which anybody who's watched Stranger Things thinks they know what the Demogorgon is. But if you don't know Dungeons and Dragons Demogorgon, you don't know the Demogorgon. The Demogorgon is this massive creature, 2 baboon heads, 2 giant arms that are tentacles. I mean, it's like it's like a big kaiju basically. And so when you compare it in scale to like these figures, it's massive in scale. And I bought her custom 3D printed, like resin printed one of those for her to paint. And she actually never managed to finish it because it was just such a massive undertaking. But it definitely becomes a time sink. And I hate having it's a bit of a tabletop snob thing, but I hate having bland gray miniatures on my table. I'd rather just do theater of the mind or do full virtual digital the way we do now.
that was something like I was doing. I'm going to pull up some footage here so everybody can see it here. Last year, like I said, was the first time I went to Pittsburgh Gaming Expo, and you guys can kind of see here. We're coming in the first time of the day. It's always like everybody's dragging, drinking your coffee and everything. But just so you guys can kind of get a look, we do like a quick look at all the different vendors, and that's one thing that I could say, like. For people you're looking for games, unless you go to this guy's booth, don't waste your time going to this wild card guy. He's just like, of all places that you could go, don't go to hit. No, I'm just kidding. Mike's a good buddy of mine. That's
Mike's great. Mike's been with us since the beginning.
But here
he was one of the people who came out at the game shop and we got kicked out.
Oh yeah, he's been for long haul.
Mm-hmm.
Here you can see a lot of the different booths with artwork. I mean, they had T-shirts. They had if you couldn't find something that you were into, there was something wrong with you. Check if you had a pulse. I know Mr. Rightway and we walked around and we were wreaking havoc, and you were kind of chuckling at that because we were leaving people like deer in headlights.
Shock and awe.
Yeah, they were just kind of like, "What are you guys doing?" Like. Mr. Rightway would just ask him some weird questions, but we got a lot of good deals. The vendors were more than willing to work with you on pricing, and that was really cool too. The Stay Puff, seeing that there, it's just not something you expect to see. Look at this guy. See, always wheeling and dealing. That guy, he never knows if you catch him. He's like, where in the world is Carmen Sandiego? So. Brian, talk a little bit about this layout here. Just this alone, setting up and figuring out where people are going to go, the footprint, that's a lot of work in that.
Yeah. So last year you got to see the largest iteration of Pittsburgh Gaming Expo to date. Previously, the other half of the building, which you can't even see in this footage here, was the entire show.
Right.
And that was... It's referred to as the South Hall. What you're in right now, you're seeing the North Hall. Last year, the year before and the year before that, all we had was the South Hall. And the first year it worked out okay. And then the second year, we ended up having another event going on the other half of the building. And we're like, we're never doing this again like this. This is a pain. We're sharing parking lot. We have people from that event trying to walk over to ours. So we expanded this for the first time in 2023 to the entire building. And we had a bunch of people tell us, like, you're not going to find enough stuff to put in this whole place. And it was kind of like they threw down the gauntlet, like, you're not going to fill that. And we'd heard the same thing when we moved to the Monroe Convention the first time. We're like, you're not going to fill the South Hall. We're like, you know what? Cool. Mandate received. So we'll fill it. And you be the judge.
You could actually use some more space. I think you would agree with that. Like, you could expand even more if you wanted to.
Yeah, so we did. We added. We may not have added footprint, but we are adjusting the hall and the layout in the North Hall. We are gonna maybe pull some things back that we had there before, so we can bring in maybe more vendors, a greater variety of vendors. And we added on a third day on the front end of the show. We added Friday. So, the vendors are going to come stocked with more inventory. So they're going to have to, because they know they're going to have to cover 3 days, and more content. So we had live music last year, and we had panels, and we had a cosplay contest, and we had a game show. We're going to do all this stuff again this year, except now this time we're going to spread it out. Things are going to breathe a little bit better. We're going to give the show a little bit more room to stretch its legs and allow people to experience everything that the show has to offer. And not have to make as many hard choices. Like, well, I really want to see that band, but I really want to play in this tabletop RPG. Or I want to compete in this fighting game tournament, but I also want to go listen to that panel. So there's no eliminating that as the show grows and the content grows, but by adding the third day on Friday, we hopefully will. So this is the South Hall, what you're seeing here.
This was a fun time that we had access before in the evening we had access. And I will say, Mike Ricker ran and hid because I challenged him in Mortal Kombat, and I couldn't find him the rest of the night. So I don't know what happened there.
Yeah. So a lot of what you're seeing here too is another example of community. So we partner with an entity called PAC, which is Pittsburgh Arcade Collective, run by Mike Hof. And we collaborate with them, and we contract some of these from a local distributor who supports the show, Starport Arcade. And so the ones that we contract in is about half the show floor, and then PAC, through their membership and their community, they bring in another good chunk of those machines. And then we also collaborate with local collectors for video retro gaming consoles and things like that. This year, we're actually collaborating with the podcast Guys, Games, and Beer. They're going to be bringing in some cool stuff for us this year. I don't want to spill the beans on what it is, but they are bringing in some cool stuff. And then we have a friend down out of Maryland who brings some really neat old school retro consoles with some really unique displays. And you bring all that together, and the South Hall becomes essentially a giant arcade for the weekend. And it's a whole lot of fun. And it's to the scale now where you walk in, and when it's all fired up, you could just walk in and close your eyes and let the sound wash over you. And it's a lot of fun. But that space, the 2 first years, that was the entire convention. And then the area where we have the live music at, that's where all the arcade machines were crammed in on top of the stage for the live music. So we really had everything kind of compressed into a much smaller area.
And then you even had this set up for the retro consoles.
Right. Everything that you're seeing in this layout existed in the previous layout.
Oh, that's crazy.
But it was this big. That's all the bigger was. We had dedicated tables for tabletop RPGs. We had a dedicated console lounge. We had some arcades. We had live music. We had some panels. And it was a day and a half, essentially. And it was a lot of work for a day and a half. So, it was really necessary that we expand the show and grow it out to give it more footprint. So, we would love to keep growing. Maybe they'll do something to renovate the space in the future, and we can grow. I have plans for growing the show, even if they don't expand the space, but still staying there in the future. So it really all depends on how this year goes, and we'll see what the strength of the show is, and that will help us determine what we do in the future. I've got some pretty wild ideas.
Yeah, I mean, there was a lot to do. I know you guys saw there, John Riggs. He was there. He got a tattoo right there at one of the tattoo parlors. We had the board. I mean, you had everything.
His first ever tattoo at a gaming convention.
Yeah, that was kind of interesting. And then he was scarred for life. He had to get more. He just the next convention he got one and so forth.
It will always be his first.
Mr. Square Pigs has joined us as well in the chat room. Welcome, Jay.
What's up, Jay?
So what I want to talk about next is kind of heartbreaking, and we're going to get into that real quick. But before we do that, we're going to take a break, guys. Just when you thought it was getting good, man, we had an awesome time last year at Pittsburgh Gaming Convention and Expo, and guess what? The bottom fell out. What happened? Stick around. We're going to talk to you right after this.
Hey, guys, let me tell you a little bit about something to do with energy. We all could use a little bit of energy in our lives, especially when we're gaming out there, right? We could all use some form of energy supplement, something to keep our mind sharp and our energy and our focus on the games. And that's where one of my latest partners, and that is MAW Energy, MAW Energy. And I want to tell you a little bit about it here today. And they have a plethora of different flavors and choices amongst everything that they have here. At MAW Energy, the mission is to fuel the gaming community with the highest quality energy. And that's one thing I like about these guys. They have a highest quality of energy focus blend on the market. And their special formulated energy drink provides gamers with sustained energy bursts and focus without the jitters and crashes. I can tell you that for certainty. Commonly associated with all the other energy drinks that I've seen personally on the market, and they're passionate about the gaming community and understand the unique demands that it places on the mind, the body, and even the soul. That's why we've partnered with this company to bring you the Mall Energy. Now, you can click on the link in the description below and check it out using my personal link. I get access to everything here, and I get credit for it. And you guys can see right here, Blue Raspberry. Blue Raspberry is one of my favorites. In fact, you guys will be able to see right here. I have the Blue Raspberry here, and this is one of my favorites, actually. I have this one, and I have the Mythic Melon. I haven't given that a try yet, but this so far, one of the things that I like about this is the fact that it's not chalky. A lot of times with these energy drinks, you get a little bit of chalk in there, and what I mean by that is that chalk aftertaste, or it doesn't dissolve. I can honestly tell you from experience, this here dissolves. So give it a try. Click on the link below and in the description and give it a try. You won't be sorry. I know I'm not.
All right, guys, we're back. And if you're just joining us, we've been talking with Brian Wissner of Pittsburgh Gaming Expo and hearing the story behind it, because this is where it gets really interesting. Because, all this is going great. Everything's running smooth. And then tragedy hits. The Monroe Convention Center, Brian, is closing down. Your main convention hall. You were scheduled. Everything was locked in. Everything. But I even think deposits were even made. Like you were in, signed, sealed, delivered, and they said, done.
Yeah. So one thing that we do every year is we do renewals like at the show. So we had probably about between 65 to 70% vendor renewal retention at the end of the show last year coming into this year. So we had all that revenue. We made our deposits towards the next year with the venue. We were booking bands, talking to guests, doing a lot of the things you need to do for a show of this scale, this complicated with this many different things going on. And then on the 17th of January, I get a call from the very, very same general manager who gave us our crack at starting this thing at the convention center to begin with. And he's like, Brian, I've got some bad news for you, but I respect you enough that I wanted you to hear it directly from me. The Monroe Convention Center is closing. And I'm like, looking at my watch, I'm looking like, it's only January. Like, Mike, it's too early for April Fools, man. Like, this can't be real. And he's like, no, I wish I was kidding. Like, it's not, it's not a joke. It's closing. So I was actually at a restaurant at that moment and kept, collected myself, kept my composure, wrapped up what I was doing there, left there, went back to my car and called Colt and said, dude, I think we may have to, like, inconceivable as it is, we may have to cancel the convention. And he's like, no, what? There's no way. Yeah, like, we may have to. And mind you, at this moment, I'm still like gobsmacked. I'm still a little bit, shell shocked, and hadn't really started to like process like what our next steps are. And I'm never one to take anything laying down. I always like to try to like, okay, cool, we've got a problem. We've had problems before. We're going to attack this. And within about like 3 hours, we had plans for a meeting that night for the inner circle of like management with the show. We sat down and came up with a battle plan, and before 24 hours had even passed, we were already touring, like on site, walking through new venues, looking at what our options were, because I'll be damned if we were going to let this thing go, at least without a fight. We were going to fight. We had commitments from the community. We had commitments from exhibitors who, had supported us through a pandemic, who were confident enough in us after like only 1 or 2 years of being in existence to say, hey, you know what? Here's the money for next year. I know you guys are going to kill it. It's always a good weekend for me. I'm going to back you a year out, and you're a small mom and pop essentially. We don't have massive corporate backing. All of our backing is pretty much from a few very, very dear sponsors who are local businesses, and from the community, from attendees and from exhibitors supporting the show. So we felt very strongly that we had to figure this out. We were going to keep our dates, and we weren't going to cancel anything, and we were going to do it in a way that kept prices the same. And so we attacked it right away. And that went on for about a couple of weeks. So we looked at the David L. Lawrence, the Wyndham Downtown, the All-American Fieldhouse, RMU Event Center, and a bunch of other venues. And we were getting ready to sign with one of those venues when, actually, let me backtrack a little bit. So from the 18th to February 12th, we were in this process of, okay, let's find a venue. And at the same time, we were also grappling with this, like, well, when do we tell everyone what's going on? Because we like to be as transparent and upfront about everything as we possibly can. But we also knew the time was of the essence, and that we may have had an advantage in finding venue replacements by keeping it to ourselves and ensuring that the show happened the same way. So a couple of weeks went by, and we were starting to hear some chatter that the rumor mill was going that the convention center was going to close. And I decided, you know what? I can't keep this from our community anymore. I can't keep this from our exhibitors anymore. They need to know. They need to know that we're in the fight, that we're working on this. And so we decided to make an announcement. That was on the 12th of February. Little did I know we were breaking the story. So we had no idea that the mayor of Monroeville had not been appraised of this. And if you're familiar with Monroeville, the entire community in Monroeville, it's a suburb of Pittsburgh. It's about 30 minutes outside of Pittsburgh. The whole community out there is kind of built up around the fact that there's a convention center there. You've our show, which is growing. You have Steel City Con, which is a massive like celebrity convention that happens there 3 times a year. You have a bunch of other shows that happen there. These things are a big economic driver for that region. So when this story broke, we decided, we're going to stay in this even more so, and we're going to go to the council meetings, and we're going to sit there and we're going to talk. We don't care if we're not on the agenda, if we can't talk. We're at least going to be there. We're going to show that we care about this issue and do what we can. So I had an opportunity to talk to the mayor of Monroeville. I explained to him what our stake was in this, and that we wanted to stay there, and he wanted us to stay there. Well, they went to work, and they got into talks with Oxford Development and Hobby Lobby, who was going to be taking over the property. And I'm not privy to what those conversations were, but what was put out in the media, some of the clips that you had played, was that they were exploring options. And back to the point I was making earlier, we were getting ready to sign a new contract. It was about March 6th. And we were getting ready to sign a new contract with a different venue that would have been a significant logistical hurdle for us, but we were going to accomplish it. And I get a call from the GM again saying, please don't tell me you've signed anything. And I'm like, I haven't, but like, we're about to. He goes, give me 72 hours. I'm like, I don't know that I can do that. Like, I have obligations. I've got to make this work for our exhibitors. I have an option here. Maybe I can do 48, but I can't make you any promises. And so he's like, okay, I'll see what I can do. 24 hours later, I get another phone call from him and saying, please tell me you didn't sign anything yet. I'm like, I didn't. He goes, cool, we're back on. I'm like, we're back on when I have a contract. So we got the contract in hand within like 12 to 16 hours.
Yep.
We signed that, and it was like a bad dream. It was like nothing had happened except for the fact that we lost about a month.
Right.
And
but then you signed it. You thought your worries were all over. And then the nightmare started again.
Well, yeah. So part of what we really rely on, and part of what makes the show so awesome, is that there's a hotel right there. Well, the hotel and the convention center are not co-owned. They're different entities. They are co-managed, but they're not the same ownership. And so we are getting ready to like kick it into gear again. And then I get how did I find out? I think I found out through social media. And I'm like, this can't be happening. The DoubleTree Hotel in Monroeville is closed. Like, closed so rapidly that there were people who were still staying there and were booked through the week. And they said, sorry, but you can't stay. So it sent us into a whole nother like bout of damage control where we now have to find another venue, but like another space for our exhibitors and for our guests. And that's where I really came to build a working relationship with Visit Monroeville, who has been phenomenal. Amy, who we work with at Visit Monroeville, has been a great resource and is getting us established with room blocks in Monroeville at the various different hotels there. So my hope is, fortunately, no major elements of the show were dependent upon the hotel for this year. My hope is in the future that the hotel comes back online and then we can work with the ownership there at the hotel and maybe explore making the show, incorporate some of that footprint as well. So there is room for growth there, but they've got to figure that issue out. But it doesn't really impact us this year. It just means that I can't walk my tired behind across a parking lot
like we did last year.
Yeah. So I'm going to work out a solution where we will not have to walk to a distant hotel, but we will maybe get shuttled or something. And really, that will be the only major change that you're going to see this year, is that the hotel will not be right there, but it will be in the Monroeville area, which is not that big. And I encourage anybody who's thinking about coming from outside of town to use the hotels once we launch badges and announce our hotel booking link. Please use those hotels because they do actually benefit the Pittsburgh Gaming Expo as we negotiate things moving forward. It helps us, believe it or not, it helps us bring in guests. It helps us bring in bands, because those partnerships, as they see the strength of the show as it relates to hotel business in the region, they want to work with us more. So it's not just a matter of like, well, I could stay 10 minutes outside of Monroeville and get a cheaper hotel.
Right.
That could be true, but it doesn't help the convention and it doesn't help the region of Monroeville, which has really been one of our rallying cries since the beginning of this. Is we wanted to stay in Monroeville and we cared about the community in Monroeville and the economy there. We could have taken our show outside of the Monroeville area.
You had options.
Even the venue we were looking at, probably the front runner for us, was still in Monroeville. So we're happy to be there, and we hope that they get this situation resolved with new ownership of the hotel and that it's back online for us in 2025.
The funny part was Brian was calling me after I'd leave a comment on something. Brian's calling me and he's like, all calm. He's like, yeah. He's like, little setbacks. I mean, this is our conversation, right? And I'm like, yeah. I'm like, you guys will find something else. He's like, yeah. Yeah, I mean, it is what it is. He's like, that's how calm Brian was. It wasn't like, oh my gosh, what are we gonna do? I mean, you were confident in that, and I said, and I think we both agreed that, listen, the vendors are gonna stand behind you, and they did.
They did.
Very
I cannot
patient.
express. I do not have the words to express how much I appreciate how patient and understanding and confident the exhibitors were in us to make this work. I think I only received 1 or 2 emails just asking for clarification. And I'm not an email guy. I believe in, if I have something very frank to talk to you about, I'm going to give you a phone call, even if I've never had a phone call before. I'm going to call you because I have your number, because it should be in my registry of exhibitors. And I'm going to call you and I'm going to explain to you if you have a question. Now, that being said, I know I didn't call all of our exhibitors because I didn't get a deluge of emails. I only received 1 or 2. And those are the exhibitors that I called. So
It's probably that Michael Rickard guy.
Actually, Michael Rickard did get a phone call. But it wasn't because of an email.
I was trying to make a joke about it here. It was actually him.
No.
Sorry, Mike. You know I love you, Mike.
I love Mike, and I love busting Mike's chops. So, yeah.
We had a good.
I did.
We had a good time with. We had a good time. Me, Mike, and Steve Wright. We hung out, and we went to Olive Garden as one of the dinners one night with his and Mike's crew and stuff. It was a good time, but I think all in all, yeah, it's inconvenient. We'll say that the hotel's not across the street, but you know what? We had a lot of fun. I know a lot of the vendors had a lot of fun. I think there was a lot of shenanigans that went on there, mainly because you get a bunch of guys together like this, and you know he's walking around and shenanigans everywhere, right? And then you got Tim Kitzero. He's like the king of shenanigans.
Yeah.
You see it right here. We're just like causing a whole mess of problems here going around. So if you're thinking about going, there's no other place that you can go and get away with things like this. As you watch this, you're going to see and understand what we're saying. I think there was times, Brian, we would like grabbed you. You were like full steam ahead somewhere. And we were like, we just grabbed a hold of you. We're like, yeah, all right, what's going? Well, I really got to get over here. We're like, well, we're live. Oh, hey guys, how's it going? We had a lot of fun. It was a good time, and even the tabletop guys, you know, like they were goofing around and having a good time. So
yep. Bob World Builder, Baron DeRop, you know, the guys from Level Up Podcast, me and Steve Tuck RPGs, those guys were all great. They had a great time. And that's part of what made this such an easy decision, that we were not going to just take this lying down. As you've said, and I know Baron said it, actually, he was on a podcast a couple of weeks ago, and he was talking a little bit about what went on. I don't view this as like cutthroat business. Like, this is like, all this is about is like the bottom line. And like, I genuinely hang out at my show.
Yeah, he does.
Like, I'm on the floor. There I am.
Look,
right
there he is.
I hang out at my show. I want to be around a bunch of people that I consider friends. And I like to approach this stuff like I have with you as a friendship.
And shady deals go down. See, you can see Daryl. He's hanging off to the side there. He's like, yo, I got some stuff in my trunk. And Steve's like, let's just go out to your car. No, it was video games he brought in. And Brian's like, well, how do I get in on it here? No, just kidding. We started having some cellular signal issues at this. Like, there's certain places at the convention center, Brian, that it was. I mean, it's nothing to your fault or anything. It's just sometimes you have that. But like that, we just stopped you. You were like,
my glasses haven't even transitioned.
You were coming from somewhere. I don't know where. We just like grabbed you and started asking you random stupid questions, like literally random stupid questions, and he's just entertaining us as we're doing it. Mainly Steve. Steve decided to, just bombard you.
And I'm always down for that, because ultimately at the end of the day, I want to have a good time at this thing too.
Sure.
So keeping the show going full steam ahead was that's a huge motivator. Is like, I got to get these people that I consider friends back to Pittsburgh again, and make and allow everybody to have this opportunity and to see, like, I mean, I'm watching this now and I see like people with their kids.
Yep.
And that's such a big part of this too. Like you have family, I have family,
Mm-hmm.
and my kids are so invested in this thing. And it crushed me to see their faces when I broke the news to them of what was going on. I was like, we have to save this. And on top of that, I already knew what we were working on. And it's stuff that I can't really talk about yet because we're finalizing those details, and we're still finalizing. Like, these are all stuff that we would have finalized months ago, but obviously we were trying to put out fires left and right. So we didn't have finalization on like bands and guests and things like that. But the roster, the band lineup we have this year, I feel like I say this every year. This roster for the bands for this year is unbelievable. I am kind of stunned that we managed to pull together a lineup like this. And same with the guests. Like, we're bringing in new guests that we haven't had before. We're bringing in developers for games that we never had before. There's so much interest in the show that and a big part of it, honestly, is because of this craziness that happened. It gave the show a ton of exposure. And guys like you and Steve and John Riggs and Baron Drop are out there talking about the show and sharing your experiences and letting people know, like, hey, this is not just a vendor show. This is not just a swap meet show, which some shows tend to be, you know, and it's not any fault of their own, but it is what it is. But when we tell you that you're going to have concerts, we're talking about multiple acts. When we tell you they're going to be guests, there's going to be guests. They may not be the biggest because we're not a guest-driven show, but it's going to be people that you've seen on YouTube or that you've seen on other platforms, or maybe they're people from the gaming industry that you've never gotten to meet. We have Paul Niemeyer. He's a sweetheart. He's dear to us.
Oh yeah.
And every time the show grows, like, we bring him back. Like, Paul's one of the people I can talk about because we're going to bring Paul back, because as the show grows, more people come that have never had that opportunity to meet Paul before. And this year's going to be bigger than ever based on the numbers that we're seeing post all the media exposure for the alleged shutdown of the convention center. Our engagement for the event on social media has absolutely obliterated anything we've ever done before. And it's very encouraging. So we're going to keep at it. And I can't wait to see, like, once we get our final lineup of things done and get our agreements all squared away and we can confidently make our announcements, they're going to be coming, and they're going to be exciting. And all I ask is that people be patient. I know we keep getting a lot of questions of when are badges going to go on sale? When are the remaining exhibitor tables applications going to get processed and invoiced? And I just want to let people know we are working on those things, but we want to do it right. And the time that we would have had to do those things right was kind of taken from us. So now we're doing a lot of things all at once in a very consolidated time frame. But it's going to be for the better of the show.
And this is where I got to put my journalist hat on. I got to do this for the audience. Come on, Brian, you got to give us an exclusive here. What you got to give us at least a little tiny morsel of something that's coming at the show that you couldn't normally talk about, but you got to kind of leak it here. Come on, you can give it to me. You know you can.
I don't know what I have that I can give that. Yeah, no, I can't. I can't give you.
Oh, come on.
Just know that the lineup on the lineup of bands is going to, like, I'm impressed by it. I want to go to this show and take off my earpiece, and take off my jacket.
Yeah, he walks around with
blend into the crowd and just enjoy the music, because it is a lineup unlike any we've had. And we've had some great lineups in the past. I love all the bands that we've had in the past, but we're kind of in a territory now again where it's like, well, the Monroe Convention and the David O. Lawrence, those are all like bucket list goals.
Yeah.
Some of these bands are bands that we weren't even entertaining trying to get for maybe another 2 or 3 years. So
that's awesome.
Yeah.
Hey guys, I tried. I thought maybe he'd spill the beans on one of the bands, but well, because I am privy to some information, but we can't talk about it. We
Yeah.
just can't talk about it. But
I don't want to promise anything that could change. But just like we had contingencies on venues, we have contingencies on bands.
Yeah.
And so if that should not happen, or if a guest should not happen, or change, I want to make sure that I'm not like giving anybody a false bill of goods on that. But even our contingencies are exciting. So.
Yeah, I mean, you can see we've been kind of following this along here. We're just randomly grabbing people, checking out different booths here. It is a lot of fun. I mean, I don't know what else to say about it except for that it's a ton of fun, and it was a lot of. I don't want to say it was a lot of work because I don't look at things that I enjoy as work. But even at one point we had that booth and we were broadcasting. You came over, sat down with me and Tim Kitzero, and we were just chatting live to the audience. And I mean, it's a place where it's organized chaos, right? When you go to a convention, that's really what it is. You just go and have a good time, and and do what you can do. And the biggest thing was for me, Brian, I could say, is we went to a good handful, half a dozen shows last year. And my son was with me on all of them. He helps with the production. You guys know he's been on camera. He's done behind the scenes. In fact, he's doing Cleveland for me this year, is producing some of it. Cleveland and Pittsburgh were his two favorite shows from last year. And that's not because you're sitting on the show. I've told you this before, and I've said it publicly before. Were the two favorite shows last year. And we were to about, I want to say we were 6. Was it 6 shows? So if that's any consolation to you guys, if you're trying to debate on what shows you want to go to, for a then 10-year-old to say, these are my two favorite shows, it's family oriented, there's something to do there. And he's not like I think Brian, honestly, I think that's the first time he played real pinball. Like, not because I have the digital ones, like just like you with the act games.
Right.
The first time he really played real pinball, where he could Then he tried to tell me I need to buy Venom, and I'm like, yeah, that's not happening. But,
well, I know a guy.
You know a guy.
I know a guy that can get you a great deal out of Venom.
But it's very, very family friendly. Your family's involved heavily in the convention.
Yeah, my kids are all over the show, helping out. My wife's heavily involved with, she basically is my lead. She runs the admissions and the merch retail end of things during the show operation. My mom's even there helping out with that. It's definitely a family business, but it's not just family in the sense of like my kith and kin. It's family in like what like the Pittsburgh retro gaming scene has built into. And like, I look forward to seeing you. And like you said, the pinball, like playing a physical mechanical pinball is one of the few luxuries in life that a lot of people don't ever get to experience.
Mm-hmm.
And there's nothing like it. It's like a classic vintage car. And, a lot of those machines that we have on the show floor are community contributed. And that's a big part of the concept of our show, is that, yes, we do contract some of it, but even the ones we are contracting locally, they're locally sourced. It's a local contract. But the ones that are community contributed, it's like going to a car cruise where, you go to like a car show. Well, the car show doesn't own all the cars. Enthusiasts, people who are passionate about those vehicles and about all the things that go into it, the art, the mechanics, the engineering, the design, all of that passion is part of that, and they bring that to the show. So when you bring your son and he gets to play Venom for the first time, and he gets to feel the ball and the solenoids and the all the like whirling of the mechanics, whirling and buzzing, that's a tactile experience you cannot replicate.
Nope.
No matter how hard they try. And I do like my virtual pinball because I have limited space.
That's not me too. Yeah.
Yeah. So like to bring that to a show, and not just to bring like 3 or 4.
Oh no, you had a lineup of it, man.
We're planning on having over 100 arcade pinball machines this year.
Wow.
We're planning on having more independent developers this year than we had last year. We're planning on having a more solid array, like the band lineup, more guests, panels. I mean, and we're adding that day on. So you're going to get 3 days out of this show now, as opposed to where it was all consolidated into a Saturday and a Sunday, even though Saturday was long.
Yeah.
We heard that. Like, oh, Saturday, man, it goes till midnight. That's a long show. Yeah, it is. But we are not a show where you show up and you walk the exhibitor hall a few times and then you leave.
Right.
It is, you come in, maybe you do the exhibitor hall and then go play games for a couple hours and then come back and look at the exhibitor hall again.
And they're all on free play.
Listen to a book. Everything's free play.
It's all on free play.
Everything's free play.
Yep.
So it's all included in your admission. We don't charge you extra for any element of the show other than competitive, game tournaments.
Right.
So like we have buy-ins for the prize pools. That's about it. Other than that, you get everything with your price of admission. Everything that whatever your badge, like, so if you get a weekend badge, you get everything.
You get everything.
Right? If you get a Friday badge or Saturday, obviously you just get to experience that part of the show, but there's always something going on. A massive cosplay contest, a video game show contest, live bands, panel. I mean, it is a ton of stuff. And I don't know, quite frankly, how we manage to squeeze it all in. But we do. And family's at the forefront of it, to get back to your point about family being involved. And even our pricing structure, we try to make it family friendly.
And that's what I wanted to say too, is as somebody that was there as a guest, I think just even how, no matter how busy you guys were, your wife, you, it didn't matter, Colt, it didn't matter. Everybody was just always like, do you need anything? Because, we're bringing this gear in, we're setting it up, and it was just like, I was like, well, yeah, actually, I think I said to Colt, I was like, yeah, I could use I needed a drill, one of the screwdriver drills to kind of readjust something. And my son was like, nobody was just like, oh, I ain't got time for this. Like, everybody was just very willing to help any way they could and hospitable. There's been shows that we've been to where it was just like, I ain't got time for this. And then they just kind of go on their own way and you're left to fend for yourself. I can honestly say that your staff, we didn't experience that there. We didn't experience that in Cleveland or a few of the other ones, but there were some that thought they were bigger than what they were. Right.
And that's something we never want to lose sight of, because otherwise it's just a really expensive hangout. If you alienate your community, you fail to recognize the fact that you exist because of them. Your entity exists, your venture exists because of their support.
Yep.
And that's also the staff too. Our staff is phenomenal.
Mm-hmm.
They have stuck by us. They've been through quite a bit now at this point, through a pandemic and then a possible venue loss. And, we kept them appraised of what was going on. And they're like, no, you know what? We're in it. You guys are in it. We're going to be in it too. And they treat the guests well. They treat the attendees well. They look out for us. They're like, Brian, how many steps have you done today? Have you drank? And, that's important, that you take care of each other, and it comes through in the quality of the product, I think, in the experience that the attendees have. Because if I'm running my staff, my volunteer staff, quite frankly, if I'm running them ragged and then they're not taking care of me, and then we all become miserable, that's going to come through, and it's going to make the show less enjoyable for people who are putting down their hard money, earn money, or that are taking time out of their daily lives to be guests at the show and support the show. And we never want that to happen.
Oh,
We
don't let
always
him
wanna make
don't
sure
let
we
him
keep
fool you,
that.
people. He did drink a good bit when
I
he
didn't
was
ever
there.
said I didn't. I mean, where's mine? Here we go.
No,
Crack one.
yeah. See, I don't normally. I told Brian, I said I don't really drink. I said, but I really want one of those beer cans that you have. So he put one down before I got there, and this was sitting on my table. And he says, here's a. Can you believe it's still in one piece, making that trip home, and it's not even dented or anything like that?
Yeah.
It sits right here on my broadcast desk,
I mean,
with a bunch of the other stuff. It's
that's
memories.
another element of the show that, like, there's so much that I forget. Like,
Yeah.
we do a beer collaboration. Like,
Yeah.
it's a gaming expo, and we do a beer collaboration.
And a lot of people wanted them as souvenirs. Remember, they were walking around asking, like, "Where can I get that?" And you're like, "Well, they're kind of gone."
You can't.
Like,
you can't. I'm gonna have to talk with Cinderlands this year and see if we can get a bunch of cans.
See if they'll do like souvenir cans where they sell the can where it's like sealed, but it has the nice label on it for guys like myself who don't drink. Where you can get the can. I mean, even if you pay $2 for it, that helps go toward the gaming expo. Like, I would get it because I'm a nerd and I'm a geek and I like this stuff on my. For me, that's the souvenir, because then it goes back to, like, my son will come down and be like, "Man, remember when Brian left that on your table?" Like, he remembers it. And so it's just stupid can, but it's just one of those things that you just kind of, it takes you back, right?
Right.
So,
and it's so unique. Like, there will never be another PGX export can.
Right.
Like, this is it.
That's it.
So that marks 2023.
Yeah.
And, I mean, they put so much love and care into the design of this. It's got a D20 on
Canned
it.
water Millennium Collector says.
Yeah. Expo series. And I'm actually really excited because we actually have started the collaboration earlier with them this year.
Nice.
So the plan is the theme will be in line with the theme of the show for this year.
Nice.
And we'll see what they come up with. But I wish they could sell it this way at the show, but they can't because of LTB issues. They can only do it via draft. But we'll explore what we can do.
Let's land this plane and get a little bit of final information on you on the future of PGX. And in the meantime, what I want to do is, guys in the chat room, you guys have been patient. You've been sticking around. Great information here from Brian. I hope you've enjoyed the story so far. As we get into this last little bit, we're gonna ask him. In a couple sentences, I always ask my guests, "What's the future? What does the future hold?" If you could say what the future is, get your questions ready. And I know Scott's warming up his fingers on the keyboard to ask the question that he asks every week. But get your questions ready, because Brian's going to be here to answer a couple questions here at the end. So, Brian, the future. What are you hoping for the goal of PGX, whether it's in the next year, 10 years, 5 years? What's the plan here?
We try to take inspiration from any show that is doing something right. And my goal, and I know Colt's and Alex's goal, is to try to bring that to Pittsburgh and emulate that. And there's already some of that happening with the way, like, we've expanded to the third day. And there's some shows in the country that go much later into the evening than we do. And we haven't quite cracked that code on that yet, but it's something we're working on. And we're planning on trying to expand the show, not just in length of day, like number of days, but maybe in number of hours per day. Things like that. Expand the show to the maximum capacity of content that the convention center can hold. And then hopefully whoever takes over ownership of the hotel, we collaborate with them, because there's space there as well. And I have a bunch of really kind of interesting ideas that I'm floating around, and I think can be really, really cool for the future of this show. Now, will it take 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, like you said, 10 years to get there? I don't know. That will be determined by the strength of the support of the community. We are a very small operation, but we are very, very creative in how we leverage the financial support that we get from the community. None of us are living solely off of this venture. We all still have our day jobs. So we take that support very seriously, and we want to make something awesome that is people can look back in like 10 years and be like, man, do you remember when PGX was just the South Hall and all the elements of the show were just in the South Hall? Because like right now, we look back, this year's the 10th anniversary of Pittsburgh Retro Gaming. We look back and like, hey, Mike Ricker, do you remember when we were at Game Masters and we had 100 people there? We had pop-up tents in the, in the parking lot, and Phil kicked us out because there was too many people. Like, we want that same experience moving forward. We want the community to feel like they have some stake in what comes next. And we get there by the community supporting all the pillars of the show, supporting the exhibitor element of the show, supporting the video game element, supporting the tabletop element. And who knows, maybe this thing grows to the point that it becomes an amoeba and we end up with a PGX Unplugged, or, just a PGX that is just video gaming and a PGX that is just tabletop, and then a PGX that is a combination of the two, so the people that haven't experienced one or the other still can get that whole experience. So we're open to all of that as we move forward, if the community support's there for it. I'm not content to sit down and be like, well, this is cool, let's just keep doing this for the next 10 to 15 years as it is. And I know my staff isn't of that mindset, and they want to constantly be challenged and given new opportunities to show what they can do. And I'm always impressed by them. So let's have those challenges, let's have those opportunities. Let's see what we can do. Let's have better gaming tournaments, bigger gaming tournaments, bigger guests, bigger bands, bigger developers in the tabletop sphere. Maybe we get some celebrity tabletop people to come and run tabletop RPGs. That's a really cool experience.
Yeah.
Those are the kind of experiences you cannot get anywhere but in Expo. And we feel like that's our responsibility to bring that to the region.
Well, I mean, that's an awesome goal to have, and I think it's going to be a lot of fun to see where this goes over the next couple of years. And it's like anything. If you don't have a vision, what you're doing dies. So it's great to have a vision. It's great to hear the vision. Guys in the chat room, I'm going to turn it over to you. And if you have any questions out there for Brian, whether it pertains to his video game collecting, whether it has anything to do with his tabletop collecting and gameplay, or if you want to know more that we didn't answer about the Pittsburgh Gaming Expo, maybe you want to get involved, maybe you want to exhibit there, questions, feel free to throw them in the chat room. And if you're watching this in replay, Brian, what's a good way that they can get a hold of you if they're interested in vending, or if there's any room and things like that? What's the best way to get in contact with you to ask those questions?
So you can reach us through like our communities. So Pittsburgh Retro Gaming or Pittsburgh Modern Gaming on Facebook. If you Google those or search them in Facebook, you'll find them both. We have an official page on Facebook for Pittsburgh Retro Gaming, but then we have communities, and that's really where it all started. So you can reach us through there. Pittsburgh Gaming Expo also has a Facebook page, or you can find us at pittsburghgamingexpo.com and go to the contact us and send us an email there, or you can just send us an email directly at info@pghretrogaming.com, and we will get back to you. We are a small team, like I said, so we may be a little bit slow to get back to email or private messages, but we will do our absolute best to get back to you. If it's something that you want to get like the general conversation going, and the community is a great place to do that. We have about, like I said, 6,000 members, a little bit more, coming up on 7,000 members in Pittsburgh retro gaming community, and it's very active and very friendly and engaging, and always good community conversation going on there.
I'm laughing. I'm not laughing at you. I'm laughing at the question. I knew it was coming. I'm going to pull it up here on the screen here from Game Closet. Mr. Scott, he's in the chat room, and he says, is there an item in your personal collection that has a very special sentimental meaning to you? What is it, and what's the story behind it? Oh, he altered it a little bit, but that's good. That was a good question.
There's a few. That's the fun thing about collecting, at least the way I collect. A lot of it's like personal to a degree. But probably the one that, and I had alluded to this before, is part of the reason why we're even here.
He's trying to be nice and say that instead of saying, if your house was burning down, what are you grabbing while you're heading out the door? That's normally what he does ask.
I don't know that any collector has a good answer to that question, because you're just going to go with the collection, to be quite honest with you, because my collection spans this room and my living room, and I can't lug the centipede out by myself.
I'm just going to let it all burn, because I'm not going to be able to grab one.
Right. I'll probably be lying underneath the centipede cabinet no, this game right here, Crystalis, is pretty special.
Love that game.
And the reason why it's special is this is a game I had a duplicate of, and this was my Zelda. I didn't have Zelda growing up. I played Crystalis, and I had a duplicate complete in box, and it's how I met Colt, and that is what started the journey of starting Pittsburgh Retro Gaming Con, or Pittsburgh Gaming Expo and Pittsburgh Retro Gaming Community. And like, if something happened to that, I'd be crushed, and so I have a copy complete box, and Colt has a copy complete in box, and we pretty much told each other, like, look, under no circumstances are we allowed to get rid of those. Like, we could sell everything else in our collections, which would probably never happen, because some of these, like this title here, like, that's my original from when I was a kid. So that's special to me. Chrono Trigger is another one that's special to me, because, my parents got it for me for Christmas. It was like the first time I was trying to like pay for a game myself, and my parents stepped in when layaway was a thing and paid off the layaway. Final Fight Guy, that game was a gift from Japan. A buddy of ours who lives in Japan, but he's from the Pittsburgh region. He comes to Pittsburgh occasionally, and we'll do an event called Import Gamer Holiday, where he'll bring a bunch of stuff from Japan and give people really good deals. And it's like a little meetup event that we have, but we only do it when he can come. Well, he asked me if there's anything special that I was looking for. And Final Fight Guy was one of the games you could rent at Eagle Video, but you couldn't buy it. And Final Fight Guy for the NES or SNES is stupid expensive. And I told him, look, if you can get me a Super Famicom copy, that's cool, because I have a Super Nintendo with the tabs snapped out of it, so I can play the Super Famicom copy.
Nice.
And he's like, okay, cool. And then he shows up with one new in box, not complete in box, new in box, with like the mini music CD and everything.
Yeah.
And he's like, here, Merry Christmas. Like, that's awesome. There's so many stories to so many of these games, and they all involve a personal collection, or a personal contact, or connection with somebody. Minish Cap, same thing. The light bar here, same thing. I could tell you who these came from over the years, because they were personal transactions within the community, and that's huge. So I honestly could not tell you which one of these items would be the one that I grabbed.
So monetarily, what's the most valuable game that you have in your collection, if you had to pinpoint?
Off the top of my head, I'd have to say it's probably Fire and Ice.
Okay.
Because it's complete in box.
The one that you're giving me, right? Okay.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's a good thing Colt's really creative. um, yeah, probably Fire and Ice. For the video game side of things.
Yeah.
For the tabletop side of things, probably um probably Tracy Hickman's XDM book, which I
Okay.
know just doesn't mean anything to you.
No, but it's
But
still interesting for those that are watching. Yeah.
yeah, Tracy Hickman, for those who don't know, is pretty much the father of the Dragonlance, which was like the Dungeons and Dragons version. Like it was like their Tolkien type thing, along with like Forgotten Realms. Like it's a cornerstone brand in Dungeons and Dragons, and he was the creator of that, and he was also the creator of Curse of Strahd, which is like Dungeons and Dragons version of Dracula, and so he wrote his own RPG, and I have a signed copy by him
Wow.
upstairs of his XDM, and like you can't get it anymore; it's out of print. So that's probably my two most valuable items as far as those things go. I'm not even sure what the arcade cabinets are worth anymore because those suckers shot up in value too.
Yeah. And they're not going to be like, they're going to burn with your house. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
They're going down with the ship. Well, Brian, I really appreciate it. I appreciate we're coming up here on almost 2 hours, man. We like time just flew. Like I was sitting here going, we're gonna have enough to talk about for the hour and a half. No, we had more than enough to talk about, which was awesome
Yep.
because we learned a lot.
Oh, it was good
you know,
fun.
it's always nice because people get to learn about the vendor, the person that runs the convention, and learns that look, they're a gamer at heart too. So like,
Mhm.
get to see behind the scenes. Any parting words that you have for anybody here that's going to watch this now or later?
Yeah. Thank you for all the support. Those of you who've been to the show in the past, thank you for the support. It doesn't go unappreciated. It's very humbling, to be quite honest, that we have built something that has become so beloved and that people were truly upset about when they heard what was going on. And the outpouring of support and the enthusiasm and elation that we've seen since it's all kind of course corrected is it drives us. We appreciate it. If you haven't ever been to the Pittsburgh Gaming Expo before, give us a chance. Give us an opportunity to give you guys a good weekend, a fun weekend with your family and your loved ones and your friends, and hang out over some games and lose track of time for a weekend. Playing games that would have normally sucked quarters out of your pockets. And let's all build a better community together, and let's play some more games.
Absolutely. And guys, if this is your first time tuning in, let me know. Send me an email if you'd like to see somebody on the show here. If you have a suggestion, we've got an all-star lineup over the next couple of weeks. I know next week we have Johnny Graphics. If you're into TurboGrafx 16 or, as Brian talked about, he's got some TurboGrafx there. I just got one of my grills, the Turbo Express, recapped, LCD. My wife knows, as Brian's wife is very supportive, my wife is very supportive as well. She knows I've been wanting that since we've gotten married. And, we were finally able in a position. She says, you know what, just go get it. And I did. I didn't wait. I didn't bat an eye. I bought it. And I play that as much as people probably play their Switch. So I'm really excited to hear what Johnny Graphics has next week. We've got a bunch of other people that are wanting to come on. We've got Nintendo, John Riggs, just to name a few. Saturn Steve, I was talking to him today. He wants to come on. So we've got a bunch of different people that are lined up that are in the works. Glenn from Glenn's Retro Show. So you want to stick around, hit the subscribe button. And Mysticals is another one. He reached out as well. So got a lot of different people. I don't care how big you are. I don't care how small you are. We want to hear your story if you've got a good story. Come on the show. Let me talk to you, and we'll have a good time. But, guys, really appreciate you tuning in. Brian, thank you again so much for coming on.
Thank you for having me, Steve.
And I look forward to seeing you again in person this November. October.
No,
I'm sorry.
October.
It's October.
October 4th, 5th, and 6th.
Good thing I said that because we got the dates down. October 4th, 5th, and 6th. 3 days.
October 4th, 5th, and 6th at the Monroeville Convention Center.
So, guys, we will see you next week. Hopefully, we'll see you in Pittsburgh. Till next time, keep it buzzing.